Boom! Hum, thundercloud, Mum calls me James. Washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. Let's have some fun and linguistic games. It's Chillin Tuesday. As I said, Mum calls me James and I'm in the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Yeah, tonight I'm continuing my journeys with a young Henry Lawson here in 1894, when Henry was just 27 years old. He went over to New Zealand, and so the poetry tonight I'm going to be reading to you was a lot of it was written about and in New Zealand. Well, let's start with a sip of my tea, Barry's Irish tea. Look, there's my dad, my boys and me. Barry's Irish tea is good for you, it's good for me. If you want a really good strong cup of tea, get some Barry's Irish tea. You know, I'm not like endorsing it, like I'm not paid to endorse it, I just like it because it's good. It tastes better than like whacking yourself over the head with a piece of wood. Not that that tastes like anything except blood. Delicious Barry's Irish tea. Righto. Henry Lawson, 1894, his travels around New Zealand. Before I kick off, one of the things I do need to mention is the Australian Poetry Film Competition. It's open for submissions now, and it's open up until the end of June for normal submissions, in October, November for late submissions when the Poetry Film Festival is here in Guyra. This year we've expanded it to 3 whole categories, which include bush poetry, the best Australian poetry film, and also best student poetry film. So let me read you a thing. Look, this is I'm actually raising funds for the Australian Poetry Film Festival. It's a unique celebration where cinematic storytelling meets evocative language of verse. It's not just any festival, it's a launch pad for emerging filmmakers and poets to spark a creative fire and make a vibrant tapestry of emotions. Look, this is important not just to me because poetry inspires me, but it's part of my mission is to support and nurture Australian poets and give them opportunities to expose themselves to the world and get out there. So by filmmakers making poetry films and poets doing poetry films, it means it's broadening the audience. So I'm running a Gofundme campaign, and I'll leave the link in underneath here in the description, and I'd really appreciate it if you could go to that and check out the GoFundMe and donate a little bit. You know, $20, that's enough to to reimburse the those who get selected for their entry fees. $100, well, that will go a long way to helping to go to the prize money for these filmmakers who will be putting in a lot of work and effort. Like for a 5 or 10 minute film, some of these people go to hundreds of hours of work. So if they can receive not just the accolades, but also a monetary reward for what they're doing, it really does make it worthwhile. And it also encourages more people to enter. It fuels the fire, it seeds stars, and it builds a community of poets and filmmakers and artists who can work together. But it also sparks the interest of young people and other people when they see what is created, and maybe they might get interested because, these days with our phones and iPads and stuff, we can make films easily anyway. So if you go to www.filmfreeway.com/Australian Poetry Film Competition or Contest, check it out. The link is down below as well for entries, and also under that is the GoFundMe link So if you could go there, and even if you can only spare $10, it's going to really help Australian poets. It's going to help me also in the marketing to get the word out, because I really want to get this festival out, not just to like poets and filmmakers in Australia, but ones, young emerging poets in schools, because there's a student component of it. There's a bush poetry, so I want to market it out into the bush poetry area, and I want to get it out to as far and wide to the film schools as possible and all filmmakers, so that we can make this second annual Australian Poetry Film Contest like something huge, like an icon for all Australia. Look, I'm going to get off that, and I'm going to read you The Windy Hills of Wellington by Henry Lawson. The windy hills of Wellington were black and cold that night. The rain came down at times enough to drown the electric light. And like a hymn of hate and want from black misfortune's choirs, I heard the cruel, spiteful wind go snarling through the wires, and from the winches by the wharf a rattle and a clank, while sitting by a Sydney chum who'd drawn New Zealand blank. He'd sent for me in all the land, the only chum he knew. His health and hope and cash were gone, and he was going too. His frame was shrunk, and his face was drawn. His eyes were bleared and dim, for drink and poverty and want had done their work for him. And when I came, he turned to me, his features pale and lank. "Oh, I'm glad you've come, old chum," he said. "Oh, I've drawn New Zealand blank. New leaf, new land. My motto was, I did my very best, was one of work that threw me back and liquor did the rest. But nothing matters now, old man, it never did, no doubt. Excuse a little nonsense when a fellow's pegging out. I'd live and fight if I had hope or money at the bank. I've lived too long in 94. Oh, I've drawn New Zealand blank." I looked out through the window as the rain came pelting down. The great black hills, they seemed to close and loom above the town. And in a strained and tired voice that filled my heart with pain, he said, "Old man, I'd like to stroll down George Street once again. I've had myself to battle for, I've got myself to thank. Perhaps it ain't New Zealand's fault. I've drawn New Zealand blank. The breezy hills of Wellington, fair as they can be, I stand and watch a Sydney boat go sailing out to sea. And while the sun is setting low on blue and brown and green, I think how cruel things are and things that might have been. And while the same old sun goes down in clouds, a golden bank, I sadly think of my old chum who drew New Zealand blank. No headstone marks his resting place, no autumn grasses wave, and not a sign of loving hands is seen above his grave. For he recovered from the spree, the doctors pulled him through. His health came back and luck turned, and so did my luck too. He now has houses, land and shares and thousands in the bank. He doesn't know me now because I've drawn New Zealand blank." Now there's a rather large written newspaper piece about across the straits. The next one I'll read for you is called Home of the Gods. In the mellifluous language of Maori, Pahetua is popularly supposed to mean the home of the gods. The fact is responsible for the following effusion from the pen of our office poet. And This was published in the Pahiatua Herald. Pahiatua. The Home of the Gods by Henry Lawson. The home of the gods was as wild as could be, and when man was a savage and nature was free, and beauty was charming because we suppose its troubles were small on the subject of clothes. When the Maori, who came with a conquering band, could live for a year on the fat of the land, when your wrongs were avenged and your feelings were oiled by a dish of stuffed enemy, roasted or boiled, and the Maori girl robbed of the best of her chaps by a rival whose beauty was barer perhaps, could wait for her turn and find ease from the sting while gnawing the shank of the brazen-faced thing. The friend of the husband, we say to his shame, on the later might dine with the wife of the same, or the husband might slaughter a lover or two, and force the wife to partake of the stew, or the wives and the husbands might fix it, of course, by eating each other by way of divorce. Thus the husband, by eating a missus untrue, had her all to himself and was rid of her too. In fact, in the chances that married life brings, there was scarcely a limit to possible things. The jilted young buck of the period, no doubt, could lay for his rival and flatten him out, and afterwards say to the girl of his oath, I've eaten your bloke, will you marry us both? And she'd marry 'em both. There was no need to say how happy with either were t'other way. And all things were lovely and lively, but the white man set foot on the track to the pa. Ran the fire through the bush and ploughed through the sods, and altered the face of the home of the gods. There's no God but money, for changed is the scene. The fat of the country live high on the lean. The councillors sit on the boundary fence. The law is explained to the stubborn and dense, where the chiefs of a nation once met to decide as to which of the prisoners first should be tried, and more he keeps tally, where Purim long odds draws wonderful plans for the home of the gods. And Rewi upon paper keeps count of our sins, and virtues where records were tattooed on skins, and Skinner collects in the streets and the scrub, where bills were collected and paid with a club. We murder our foes just by running them down when they are not there, and the belles of our town fight rivals with words that are harder than stones and hurt them far worse than by picking their bones. And we toil through the week, and on Sunday nights we murder our sorrows in beery delights, till Constable Cooper appears on the scene and puts in a word on behalf of the Queen, and we lend and we borrow our vanishing wads of tobacco in the home of the gods. And Bailey, the editor, sits in his den and writes it all up with a magazine pen, and the horrible punster who says, I have come to Bailey out, Bailey. That's it. It ends. The editor returned unexpectedly at this point, and shortly afterwards the poet and his mate left the office under sudden and painful circumstances. Yeah, okay. And there's that one about a wild Irishman. Now, coming up this week here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame, on Friday night, we have the amazing, heartfelt, hilarious, catchy, sing-along, alt-folk Cassie Judy, Her Body Parts Tour. Wow, an incredible vibe of fun it's going to be. Look, I love Cassie's mix of serious, funny and cheeky lyrics. Check her out, Cassie Judy online there. Entry's only $10 and it's Friday night from 7 o'clock. Doors open at 6:30. So come along here, it's going to be fantastic. Now, and the other one here, Ali Rowe, next week, next Wednesday, instead of Wednesday Words, on Wednesday the 17th of January, for the first night of the Gyra Lamb and Potato Festival, we've got the amazing Ali Rowe coming all the way from Gippsland. Well, actually not, because they've been up there at the Woodford Folk Festival and they're on their way to Tamworth going home to Gippsland. But in the meantime, they're stopping here in Gyra. And guess what? Tickets are only $10. That's Wednesday the 7th of January at 6 p.m. here. And they're fantastic. These people were buskers of the year, at Tamworth. They are amazing. They are. Check them out. Cassie Judy and Ali Rowe. Cassie Judy this Friday, only $10, and Ali Rowe next Wednesday, only $10. Like, that's so cheap. Where do you get live music for only $10? Here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame, of course. Wow! All right, let's read some more poetry for you. All right. This one's interesting because it does come with a written piece beforehand called Aki Aki Aki, Last Stand of the Maoris. And it begins like this. They were barely 500, rudely armed and undrilled, and for 3 desperate days and nights they held their pitiful fort against starvation and 1,500 British troops. Rewi led. He was against the war from the first, seeing how it would end. He had no faith, but he was true to his race until the last. When the English sappers broke through the outer works and in the fierce pause before the end, General Cameron, with an orderly and a flag of truce, appeared suddenly in front of the smoke curtain of battle. The Maoris listened to what the man had to say. Cameron's heart was touched by the Spartan-like bravery of those dusky rebels. He wished to offer their chief honourable turns, such as one brave man might offer to another. It was no longer, not just then, a case of 1,500 soldiers against a handful of half-armed warriors. It was a case of man to man. Rewi and Cameron and the white man got the worst of it. Seeing that he had a heart, perhaps no terms except death seemed honourable to the Maoris' untutored minds. Perhaps they wavered and were inclined to do the common sense thing and capitulate. But the time had come, and the man, he generally does, he was a young chief, a brother of Rewi. Some say it was Rewi, but it doesn't matter. He leapt on the earthworks and shouted words which have become famous as the Maori defiance. We will fight forever, forever, forever. The line caught on. They took it up, for the war cry or death song wailed on through the bitter end of the fight. Aki, 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 forever, forever, forever. And wailed on in the wet night wind while Rewi and a few of his men lay beaten and hiding in the marshes. And so, from the lips of a savage, yet from the soul of a man, came the southern war cry, which is destined to ring on through the stormy future histories of the Australias. We will fight on forever, forever, forever. That was published in the Worker. And then this poem, titled Rewi to Grey, the old Maori chief's last message. We have lived till these times, brother, we who have lived in those. We have now grown old together, soon our lives must close. Rewi's first, for I am dying ere I go where all is true. From my heart a wish is flying, this is my great word to you. Mine to you and those who love us, be they white or brown. Let there be one stone above us when they've laid us down. Let us rest together, brother, when our gods recall us to. Grant my wish, I have no other. This is my great word to you. Let there be one stone above us, standing for a sign. On one side your name be written, on the other mine. In my heart your name is lying. We shall meet where all is true. From my heart the wish is flying. This is my great word to you. Rewi to Grey by Henry Lawson. The next one is called The Later End of Spring. The later end of spring. The wild, wet waves in winter time were drifting o'er his head. He wrote to her from Maoriland, and this is what he said. It's hard to make a living, but whatever fate may bring, I'll come to meet the summer in the later end of spring. To my lips your kisses cling. You to me are everything. I will come to clasp my darling in the later end of spring. She wrote, and if she waited, then she waited all in vain. The spring went by and summer and the autumn came again. The autumn passed and winter, and the youth of whom we sing was felling bush for tucker in the later end of spring. When your heart is on a string, and small rest the night can bring, oh, it's a weary, weary waiting in the later end of spring. She wrote, but his hopes were crushed as often as they rose. Otago's winds blow mighty, cold through Australian old clothes. The year went round again, and he, what sorrows fate can bring, was digging gum in tatters in the latter end of spring. He would lose his head and sing of his blue-eyed lily king. 'Twas a brown-eyed girl that loved him in the later end of spring. But luck will change forever, however, and wherever you may roam. An uncle left him money, and the calf grew fat at home. Then never ship can sail too fast when love is on the wing. He came to claim his sweetheart in the latter end of spring, and his footstep had a swing when he asked for Lily King. She was married to a banker in the latter end of spring. His brow went cold with pain, and then with anger it grew hot. I'll love the girl who loves me, since the girl I love forgot. He turned to her in whose soul his love was everything. He married her in Maoriland before the end of spring. Then fill the glass and sing, for time is on the wing. It's jolly, jolly living in the luring months of spring. Henry Lawson, The Latter End of Spring. The next one, to Tom Bracken. The sunny south is hard, best at heart. Let's start again. To Tom Bracken. The sunny south is at best is hard and cold to southern writers, but oh, it's frozen to the bard amongst the other siders. They hear the song, but not the groan, while horses they are backing. He asks for bread, they grudge a stone. When he is dead, Tom Bracken, he's left to starve when Stony broke, to put his trust the Lord on, to hang himself like Barclough Bowick, or shoot himself like Gordon. He's left to battle in the ruck with poverty attacking. You should be glad that you have struck a softer spot, Tom Bracken. Oh, had you tracked where Kendall trod, I think you would be kneeling 3 times a week, thanking God that you were of New Zealand. For this I'll say, to make it short and keep my tongue from clacking, the people are a kind of sort you're singing for, Tom Bracken. Tom Bracken, that was by Henry Lawson, published in The Worker. All right, let's get through to the next Henry Lawson poem. All right, this one was published in the days when the world was wide. It's called Australian Bards and bush reviewers. While you use your best endeavour to immortalise in verse the gambling and the drink which are your country's greatest curse, while you glorify the bully and take the spielers apart, your clever southern writer scarce inferior to Bret Harte. If you sing of waving grasses when the plains are dry as bricks, and discover shining rivers where there's only mud and sticks, if you picture mighty forests where the mulga spoils the view, you're superior to Kendall and ahead of Gordon too. If you swear there's not a country like the land that gave you birth, and its sons are just the noblest and most glorious chaps on earth, if in every girl of Venus your poetic eye discerns, you're gracefully referred to as the young Australian Burns. But if you should find that Bushmen, spite of all the poets say, are just common brother sinners, and you're quite as good as they, you're a drunkard and a liar and a cynic and a sneak, your grammar's simply awful and your intellect is weak. Australian Bards and Bush Reviewers by Henry Lawson. Well, the next one is the actual poem of In the Days When the World Was Wide by Henry Lawson. The world is narrow and ways are short, and our lives are dull and slow. For little is new where the crowds resort and less where the wanderers go. Greater or smaller, the same old things we see by the dull roadside. And tired of all is the spirit that sings of the days when the world was wide. When the north was hale in the march of time and the south and the west were new, and the gorgeous east was a pantomime as it seemed in our boyhood's view. When Spain was first on the waves of change and proud in the ranks of pride, and all was wonderful, new and strange in the days when the world was wide. Then a man could fight if his heart were bold and win if his faith were true. Were it love or honour or power or gold or all that our hearts pursue, could live to the world for the family name or die for the family pride, could fly from sorrow and wrong and shame in the days when the world was wide. They sailed away in the ships that sailed ere science controlled the main, when the strong brave heart of a man prevailed as 'twill never prevail again. They knew not whither nor much cared, let fate or the winds decide. The worst of the great unknown they dared in the days when the world was wide. They raised new stars on the silent sea that filled their heart with awe. They came to many a strange country and marvellous sights they saw. The villagers gaped at the tales they told, and old eyes glistened with pride when barbarous cities were paved with gold in the days when the world was wide. 'Twas honest metal and honest wood on the days of the outward bound, when men were gallant and ships were good, roaming the wide world round. The gods could envy a leader when, "Follow me, lads," he cried. They faced each other and fought like men in the days when the world was wide. They tried to live as freemen should. They were happier men than we in the glory days of wine and blood when liberty crossed the sea. 'Twas a comrade true or a foeman then, and a trusty sword well tried. They faced each other and I fought like men in the days when the world was wide. The good ship bound for the southern seas when the beacon was Ballarat, with a ship ahoy in the freshing breeze. Where bound, and what ship's that? The emigrant train to New Mexico, the rush to the Lachlan side. Ah, faint is the westward ho echo of the days when the world was wide. south and east and west in advance of time and in advance of thought. Those brave men rose to a height sublime, and it is for this they fought. And it is for this damn life we praise the godlike spirit that died at Eureka's stockade in the roaring days when the days of the world was wide. We fight like women and feel as much. The thoughts of our hearts we guard were scarcely the scorn of the gold God could touch, and the sneer of a sneak hits hard. The treacherous tongue and cowardly pen, the weapons of cursed aside, they faced each other and fought like men in the days when the world was wide. Think of it all, of the life that is. Study your friends and foes, study the past and answer this: are these times better than those? The lifelong quarrel, the paltry spite, the sting of your poisoned pride. No matter who fell, it were better to fight as they did when the world was wide. Boast as you will of your mateship now crippled and mean and sly. The lines of suspicion on friendship's brow were traced since the days gone by. There was room for the long free lines to the van to fight for it side by side. There was beating room for the heart of a man in the days when the world was wide. With its dull brown days of a shilling an hour, the dreary of year drags around. Is this the result of England's old power, the born of the outward bound? Is this the sequel of westward ho, of the days of whate'er betide? The heart of the rebel makes no answer, no. We will fight till the world grows wide. The world shall yet be a wider world, for the tokens are manifest. The east and north shall the wrongs be hurled that follow the south and west. The march of freedom is north by the dawn, follow whate'er betide. Sons of exiles, march, march on, march till the world grows wide. Here we go. The next one. It's a bit of a song, really. It's got a chorus, but I'm only going to do the chorus twice, at the beginning and at the end. It's called Beautiful Maoriland, or Love and the Union. Love and the Union, by Henry Lawson. A shearer came to a blackleg shed when most of the sheds were full. He tramped and tramped till his hope was dead, and ne'er his hands gotten wool. He'd stuck to the union hard and fast, with no one to understand how his heart had longed as the weeks dragged past for his love and his Maoriland. Chorus. Fern and tussock and flax, range and river and sea, a stain on my heart will never relax, a heart that will never be free. And why should I break my heart, he sighs, will the union break through me? She draws me back with her great brown eyes over the leagues of sea. Beautiful Maoriland, glorious Maoriland, oh, my heart for my darling waits down yonder in Maoriland. Go in and sign, the boss said once more, for we can't wait here all day. The shearer turned to the office door, and again he turned away. His spirit shrank from the dreadful track, and here was a vacant stand, the chance of a cheque that would take him back to his home in Maoriland. You've nothing to fear, said the boss again, for the law protects you now. The shearer turned with a twinge of pain and warily wiped his brow. His ears grew dull, his eyes grew dim, he gazed at the burning sand and thought of his darling who watched for him at his home in Maoriland. Sign your name there, said the Mulga clerk. Write your name there, he said. The shearer read and his brow grew dark as the shameful clause he read. The squatter's agreement before him spread, the pen in trembling hand. A few short weeks in the shearing shed, then home to his Maori land. Then never a train too swift could run, or ship could sail too fast when the shed cut out and the cheque was won. He followed his heart at last. He stooped to sign when it seemed to him that a cold breath touched his hand, and a sweet clear voice he knew cried, "Jim," from the past, from Maori land. As you drop a snake, he dropped the pen, and short, sharp breath he drew. Oh, was it a spirit that whispered then, "Be true to your mates, be true"? He shouldered his swag and he faced the track, the heat and the flies and sand, perhaps in the hell out to die, perhaps in the hell out back, for the honour of Maori land. He followed the light of the Union Star. His love was a thing apart, but a heavier load than his swag by far was the load on the shearer's heart. And long ere the season had passed away, his heart was vacant stand. He learned that his darling had died that day in his dreary Maori land. Fern and tussock and flax, range and river and sea, stain on my heart that will not relax, a heart that will never be free. Promises fair in the future rise, what are they all to me? She haunts me still with her great brown eyes over the leagues of sea. Beautiful Maori land, dreary Maori land, oh my heart, for my heart lies dead in desolate Maori land. The next one, Martin Farrel by Henry Lawson. Just before the last elections, and the chaps were fighting well round about the Para River on the borderland of hell, but the story of the struggle doesn't matter anyhow, but for Parliament of Angels couldn't save the country now. But a poor old fellow struggled to a hut one broiling day, and his ragged swag fell off him in a hopeless kind of way. He was sick, very shaky, and his eyes were blurred and dim. It was plain to all the fellows that 'twas nearly up with him. He was stiff and out of tucker. All the fellows understood. He wanted medicine and rest before he wanted food. He was making for the border underneath the blazing sun, old and weak and nearly tottered, but half his journey done. Oh, if I couldn't put the time up in Hungerford, he said, until after the election, I'd be ready to be dead. I wouldn't care too much, he sighed. My time is nearly past, but I've got to vote for Huey, and I suppose it'll be my last. And the rough and noisy bushmen gathered round. Their manner grew in a moment soft and gentle, for their hearts, of course, were true, and they said, "What's up, old fella? What can we do for you?" Then he raised his head a moment, and the tired answer came, "There's nothing you can do, lads, but thank you all the same. I'm pretty cronk and shaky. Too far gone for hell or heaven, and the chances are I'm going, and I'm going to do the 7. But it isn't that gripes you, and I'll tell you what it is. Life ain't over bright and rosy button and rounds in times like this. For many a years I knocked round here where living is a crime, and I couldn't get a vote, not once, though I tried it every time. But I got into 'em. This time, when I did, I said, this belongs to Huey Langwood, and I'll vote before I die. And I can't reach Yanta Bula. That's the thing that makes me fret. Chaps, I've got a vote for Huey, but it ain't no Monty yet. And it wasn't chaps he knew. That same night did his 7, no doubt the swagman's name is safe upon the list in heaven. All right. O'Hara, JP. James Patrick O'Hara, Justice of the Peach. He bossed the PM and he bossed the police, a parent, a deacon, a landlord was he. A townsman of weight was O'Hara, JP. He gave out the prizes, foundation stone laid. He shone when the governor's visit was paid. And twice re-elected as mayor was he. The flies couldn't roost on O'Hara, JP. Now Sandium, fly of the axe and the saw, was charged with the breach of the licensing law. He sold after hours while talking to free on matters concerning O'Hara, JP. And each contradicted the next witness flat concerning back parlours, side doors and all that. 'Twas very conflicting, as all must agree you'd better take care, said O'Hara, JP. But baby, the barmaid, her evidence gave, a poor timid darling who tried to be brave. Now don't be afraid if it's a frightening you be. Speak out, my good girl, said O'Hara, JP. Her hair was so golden, her eyes were so blue, her face was so fair, and her words seemed so true. So green in the ways of street woman was he, that she jolted the heart of O'Hara, JP. He turned to the other grave Justice of Peace and turned, you can't always trust the police. I'll visit the premises during the day and see for myself, said O'Hara, JP. Case postponed. It was early next morning or late the same night. It was early next night. We think would be right. Pardon me. And sounds that betokened a breach of the law escaped through the cracks of the axe and the saw. And Constable Doherty, out in the street, met Constable Clancy, bit off his beat, and took him with finger and thumb by the ear and led him around to a lane in the rear. He pointed a blind where strange shadows were seen, wild pantomime hintings of revels within. We'll drop on my fly if you'll listen to me and prove we're right, to O'Hara, JP. But Clancy was up to the lay of the land. He cautiously shaded his mouth with his hand, whilst man howled, you wish, its ruin will be, it's the justice himself of O'Hara, JP. They hissed and they wished and they turned themselves round and got themselves off like two cats on the ground, agreeing to be dumb on their honour as men, as deaf and dumb blind institution just then. Inside of on a sofa, two barmaids between, with one on his knee, was a gentleman seen, and any chance eye was the keyhole could see in less than a wink was O'Hara, JP. The first in the chorus of songs that were sung, the loudest that laughed, the jokes that were sprung, the guest of the evening, the soul of the spread, the daddy of all was O'Hara, JP. And hard cases chuckled and hard cases said that Baby and Alice conveyed him to bed. In subsequent storms, it was painful to see those hard cases side with the O'Hara, JP, with sinful JP. Next day in court, when the case came in sight, O'Hara declared he was satisfied, quite. The case was dismissed. It was destined to be the final case of O'Hara, JP. The law and religion came down on him first. The Christian was hard, but his wife was the worst. Half ruined, half driven, half crazy was he. Made an old man of O'Hara, JP. Now, young men who come from the bush, do you hear? Do know not the power of barmaids and beer. Don't see for yourself from temptation. Steer free. Remember the fall of O'Hara, JP. All right. The next one. Republican pioneers. This is interesting because back in 1888, Henry Lawson's mum left Henry Lawson's dad in Goolgong and travelled to Sydney, and she actually opened a magazine called The Republic. There she is, Louisa Lawson, just there, Henry Lawson's mum, but this is Henry Lawson, Republican pioneers. We're marching along, we're gathering strong, we place on our right reliance. We fling in the air for all who care our first loud notes of defiance. We fling in the air for all who care our first loud notes of defiance. Laugh long and loud, you toady crowd, at the men you call benighted. In spite of your sneers, we're pioneers of Australian states united. In spite of your sneers, we are pioneers of Australian states united. Not long we'll stand as an outcast band and be in our country lonely, for soon to the sky shall ring our cry sky of Australia only. For soon to the sky shall mount our cry of Australia only. And we'll sleep in sound in the Australian ground near the blue cross flag star lighted, where it freely waves over the grass-grown graves of the pioneers are united, when it floats and veers o'er the pioneers of Australian states united. Next one, in the street, where the needlewoman toils through the night with hand and brain till the sickly daylight shudders like a spectre at the pane, till her eyes seem to crawl and her brain seems to creep and her limbs are all tremble for the want of rest and sleep. It is there the firebrand blazes in my blood, and it is there I can see the crimson banter of the children in despair. That I feel the soul and music in a rebel's battle song, and the greatest love for justice and the hottest hate for wrong. When the foremost in his greed presses heavy on the last, in the brutal spinning raising from the graveyard of the past, where the door are trodden down, where the rich are deaf and blind, it is there I feel the greatest love and pity for mankind. There, where heart to heart is saying, though the tongue and lip be still, we've been through it all and know it, brother, we've been through the mill. There, the spirits of my brothers rise the higher for defeat, and the drums of revolution roll forever in the street. Christ is coming once again, and his days drawing near. He is leading on the thousands of the army in the rear. We shall know the second advent by the lower skies of flame, with the signals of his coming, for he comes not as he came, not humble, meek and lowly as he came in days of old, but with hatred, retribution for the worshippers of gold, and the roll of battle music and the steady tramp of feet sound forever in the thunder and the rattle of the street. Oh, here we go, the death of Charlie Turner. Short quatrain. When Charlie sang of Pollen's death, 'twould stir your heart and soul, and you'd grip your seat and hold your breath. You'd want to fight for Poland. Okay. Where are we up to? All right. Old Joe Swallow by Henry Lawson. Old Joe Swallow, with his short clay pipe, his hat pushed back from his brow, loves to linger by the hut fireside and pitch about old days now. Chorus. Old Joe Swallow in the days gone by, when his form was straight as a lance, he'd bring bright sparkles to each bush girl's eye when he came to the gay bush dance. There wasn't a drover in the back country with old Joe Swallow could ride. With a flick of his stopwhip he would cut the brand out of an outlaw's hide. With his cabbage tree hat on the back of his head, strap breeches and bright red sash, his devil hairstyle and days are dead, young Joe Swallow cut a dash. Says old Joe Swallow, them days is dead, them rare ones, time goes by. For he pauses a moment just to shake his head, for the smoke gets into his eye. Oh, old Joe Swallow, in the days gone by, when your form was straight and tall, you'd bring bright sparks to a lassie's eye, when you'd come to the gay bush ball. There you go. That's it, the chorus. Well, we're getting closer and closer to the end of Henry Lawson's 1894 poetry. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've only got 2 more to go. All right, well, on that note, don't forget, from the 17th to the 28th of January, here in Guyra, is the Guyra Lamb and Potato Festival. And during that Lamb and Potato Festival, every day at 2:30, yours truly, Thundercloud, and whoever other Guyra poets are around, we're going to be doing a poetry show, 2:30, most days of the Lamb and Potato Festival from about the 17th through to the 27th of January. Yes, it's true. Don't forget, Cassie Judy coming next week, or this week, this Friday on the 12th. Ali Rowe next week, Wednesday night. Both of them, tickets are only $10. That's fantastic. And then, down below, check out the link to the Gofundme for the Australian Poetry Film Competition, which supports Australian poets and filmmakers in this wonderful new initiative now in its 2nd year. And if you could donate some money to the Australian Poetry Film Contest for prize money for the poets and filmmakers, and also to help me get the word out as far and wide so we can get some wonderful films made and into the Australian Poetry Film Contest. This year there's a Best Australian Poetry Film, Best Australian Bush Poetry Film, and Best Student Poetry Film as well for students enrolled in educational institutions. All right, last of all, we got one called Marshall's Mate, second last, by Henry Lawson. You almost heard the surface bake and saw the gum trees turn. You could have watched the grass scorch brown had there been grass to burn. In such a drought, the strongest heart might well grow faint and weak. 'Twould frighten Satan to his home, not far from Dingo Creek. The tanks went dry on 90 Mile as tanks go dry out back. The halfway spring had failed at last when Marshall missed the track. Beneath a dead tree on the plain we saw a pack horse reel. Too blind to see there was no shade, too done up to feel. And charcoaled in the canvas bag, 'twas written pretty clear, we read the message. Marshall wrote, it said, I'm taken queer. And I'm off somewhere off dead man's track, half blind and nearly dead. Find Crowbar, get him sobered up, and followed back. It said, let Mitchell go to Bandicoot, you'll find him there, said Mac. I'll start the chaps from starving steers and take the dry holes back. We tramped till dark and tried to track the pack horse on the sands. And just at daylight, Crowbar came with Milroy's station hands. His cheeks were drawn, his face was white, but he was sober then. In times of trouble, fire and wood, 'twas Crowbar led the men. "Spread out widely as you can each side of the track," said he. "The first thing to find him, make a smoke that all the rest can see." We took the track and followed back where Crowbar followed fate. We found a dead man in the scrub, but 'twas not Crowbar's mate. The station hands from starving steers were searching all the week, but never news of Marshall's fate came back to Dingo Creek. And no one save the spirit of the sand waste, fierce and lone, knew where Jack Marshall crawled to die, but Crowbar might have known. He'd scarcely closed his eyes or drawn a sleeping breath. They say that Crowbar slept no more until he slept in death. A careless roving scamp that loved to laugh and drink and joke, but no man saw him smile again, and no one saw him smoke. And when we spelled at night, he'd lie with eyes still open wide and watch the stars as if they'd paint the place where Marshall died. The search was made as searches are, and often made in vain. And on the seventh day we saw a smoke across the plain. We left the track and followed. 'Twas Crowbar that still led. And when his horse gave out at last, he walked and ran ahead. We reached the place and turned again, dragged back, and no man spoke. It was a bushfire in the scrubs that made the cursed smoke. And when we gave it best at last, he said, "I'll see it through," although he knew we'd done as much as mortal men could do. "I'll not, I won't give up," he said, his hand pressed to his brow. My God, the cursed flies and ants, they might be at him now. I'll see it so in 20 years till 'twill haunt me all my life. I could not face his sister, and I could not face his wife. "It's no use talking to me now. I'm going back," he said. "I'm going back to find him, and I will, alive or dead." He packed his horse with water and provisions for a week, and then at sunset crossed the plain away from Dingo Creek. We watched him tramp beside the horse till we, as it grew late, could not tell which was Bonaparte and which was Marshall's mate. The dam went dry at Dingo Creek and we were driven back, and none dared fence the 90 mile when Crowbar took the track. They saw him at Dead Camel and along the dry hole creeks. There came a day when no one heard of Marshall's mate for weeks. They'd seen him at no Sunday. He called at starving steers. There came a time when no one heard of Marshall's mate for years. They found old Bonaparte at last, picked clean by hungry crows, but no one knew how Crowbar died, the sound of Marshall knows. And now, way out on Dingo Creek when winter's days are late, the bushmen talk of Crowbar's ghost, what's looking for his mate. For let the fools indulge their mirth, and let the wise men doubt. The soul of Crowbar and his mate have travelled further out, beyond the furthest two-fence rail, coal lane and never tire, beyond the furthest rabbit-proof barbed wire and common wire, beyond the furthest government tank and past the furthest bore, the never, never, no man's land, no more and never more. Beyond the land of break of day and sunset in the dawn, the soul of Marshall and the soul of Marshall's mate are gone. Unto that loving, laughing land where life is fresh and clean, where the rivers flow all summer and the grass is always green. Well, I'm up to the very last poem here of Henry Lawson in 1894. This is I'll Tell You What, You Wanderers. Before I read that, smash the like button, the thumbs up button, please do it for me, and leave a comment. Tell me which poem you've really liked tonight, okay? And then check out the description and click on that Gofundme and please donate to the Australian Poetry Film Competition that I'm organising to make it great. Thank you very much. Last one, I'll Tell You What, You Wanderers by Henry Lawson. I'll tell you what, you wanderers who drift from town to town, don't look into a good girl's eye until you've settled down. It's hard to go away and leave old chums behind. It's hard to travel steering when your tastes are more refined. To reach a place when times are bad and to be stranded there. No money in your pocket nor a decent rag to wear. But to be forced from that fond clasp, from that last clinging kiss, by poverty there is on earth no harder thing than this. I'll Tell You What, You Wanderers, published in The Worker by Henry Lawson. All right. Well, look, that's it for me from Chillin Tuesday, this 9th of January, from the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Yes, I did have a break last week while I was down at Armidale, at the Armidale Poets there at the Grand Hotel. The first Tuesday of every month, 6 o'clock. Check it out in Armidale, if you're in Armidale, the Grand Hotel. Now, every Wednesday here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame is the Wednesday Words Open Mic Night. Now, it's just not about poetry. If you're a musician and you want to come and play your guitar or sing a song or just stand up and speak, you're welcome. So every week, 6:30, we kick off. I open the doors at 5:30, and if you want to come and get a meal from Seahorse Medicine Cafe, the best plant-based restaurant in Guyra, definitely. Vegan and vegetarian. There's nothing else like it, for sure. All right, I'll see you tomorrow night for Wednesday Words. I'm Thundercloud. I'm washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rain. Hey, if you've got poetry books and you're a poet or you've got a collection of poetry books and you don't know what to do with them because you might be downsizing, moving, death nesting, whatever, send them to me. Here, the Australian Poetry Library and Archive behind it's over 2,500 poetry books from Australia and some international ones. And it keeps growing. And it's got some really rare stuff in it. And that's why it's important, because it's got all of this wonderful cultural heritage here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Look, if you're coming along on a holiday, passing through Guyra, pop in. I'm more than hospitable. Yeah, all right. I'm Thundercloud, washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. Don't forget that link in the bio to donate to my Gofundme and check out the Australian Poetry Film Competition. Yes, I'll see you later. Boom!